You just fed your reptile. You think you did everything right. But what if that one habit you repeat every single week is slowly making your animal sick? Reptile keeping has exploded in the USA, with over 9 million households now owning one. But the feeding mistakes? They have not changed. I am counting down the 8 biggest feeding errors reptile owners are still making. Number 8, feeding on the wrong schedule. Let us kick things off with timing. A lot of owners just feed their reptile whenever it feels convenient. Monday maybe, Thursday if they remember. And while reptiles are hardy animals, inconsistent feeding schedules cause real stress on their digestive systems. Bearded dragons, for example, need daily feeding when they are juveniles and every other day as adults. Ball pythons do well with one feeding every 7 to 10 days. When you ignore these windows, your reptile can either become overweight or nutritionally deficient, and both outcomes are harder to fix than people think. Here is something most people do not consider. Overfeeding a reptile is just as dangerous as underfeeding. An obese bearded dragon develops fatty liver disease. An overfed leopard gecko stores so much fat in its tail that internal organs become compressed. These are not rare edge cases. They are some of the most common presentations exotic vets see in the United States right now. The fix is simple. Look up the specific feeding schedule for your species and write it down. Treat it like a real routine, not something you do when you happen to remember. Number 7, using feeder insects that are not gut-loaded. This one surprises a lot of new owners. You go to the pet store, grab a container of crickets, toss them in the tank, done. But those crickets have probably been sitting in a box with almost no nutrition in them. When your reptile eats an empty cricket, it gets almost nothing useful from it. Gut loading means feeding your feeder insects a nutrient-rich diet for at least 24 hours before offering them to your reptile. Leafy greens, carrots, high-quality commercial gut load products. The insect becomes a vessel for nutrition, and that nutrition transfers directly to your animal. Think of it this way. A cricket that has been eating dry cardboard for 3 days is nutritionally closer to an empty shell than a real food source. But a cricket that has spent 48 hours eating collard greens and sweet potato is genuinely packed with the vitamins and minerals your reptile needs. The difference in long-term health outcomes between these two scenarios is enormous. Skipping this step is one of the most common reasons reptiles develop calcium deficiencies over time, even when owners think they are doing everything else right. Number 6, skipping dusting supplements. Staying on the theme of nutrition, let us talk about dusting. Even if you gut load your insects perfectly, it is often not enough. Most reptiles that eat live insects need their food dusted with calcium and vitamin D3 powder before every feeding, or at minimum several times per week. Without proper calcium, reptiles develop metabolic bone disease. It is painful, progressive, and unfortunately very common in the United States. Vets see it constantly in bearded dragons, leopard geckos, and chameleons. One thing worth mentioning here is that not all supplements are equal. Calcium without D3 works well for reptiles that get real UV exposure through a proper UVB bulb. Calcium with D3 is what you need if your setup lacks adequate UVB lighting. Using the wrong one or doubling up on both can create a different kind of imbalance. So check your enclosure lighting before you buy your supplement and match the two together intentionally. The good news is that dusting itself takes about 5 seconds. Shake the insects in a small bag with the powder and you are done. There is no excuse to skip it. Number 5, offering prey that is too large. Halfway through the list, and this one is important for anyone keeping snakes or lizards that eat whole prey. The general rule is that the prey item should be no wider than the widest part of your reptile's body. But people push it. They figure their ball python can handle something just a little bigger this time. Here's the problem. Oversized prey puts serious strain on the digestive system. It can cause regurgitation, which is traumatic for snakes and can damage the esophagus. Repeated regurgitation can permanently affect feeding responses and lead to a snake that refuses food for months. There's also a secondary issue that gets overlooked. When a snake struggles excessively to constrict or swallow oversized prey, the physical effort itself creates stress. A stressed snake in feeding mode is also more likely to strike unpredictably, which matters for your safety as much as theirs. Keeping prey size appropriate keeps the whole feeding process calmer and safer for both of you. If you're not sure whether a prey item is the right size, go smaller. Always go smaller. Number 4. Handling your reptile right after feeding. We are in the top 4 now, and this mistake is incredibly widespread. You feed your snake or lizard, and then an hour later, you want to hold it. Maybe you have guests over. Maybe you're just excited. But handling a reptile too soon after feeding is a serious problem. Reptiles need time to digest. Their metabolism is temperature dependent, and stress after feeding causes them to regurgitate. For most snakes, you should wait a minimum of 48 hours after a meal before any handling. For lizards, it is typically 24 hours at least. Beyond regurgitation, handling too soon can cause your reptile to associate feeding with stress, which can eventually lead to food refusal. This is especially sensitive in younger animals that are still building their comfort with you. A simple habit that helps is feeding your reptile at the end of the day, right before you go to bed. That way, the first 8 hours of digestion happen overnight while you are asleep anyway, and you are far less tempted to pick them up immediately after. Give them the time they need. It will strengthen your bond in the long run. Number 3, feeding live prey unsupervised. Top 3. And this one carries real risk that most people do not take seriously enough. Live rodents can and do injure reptiles. A mouse or rat that is not quickly consumed will defend itself. Bites to the face, eyes, and body are documented in injuries in snakes that were left alone with live prey. In some cases, the injuries are severe enough to require veterinary care. What makes this mistake especially frustrating is that it often happens to experienced keepers who have done it dozens of times without a problem. They get comfortable. They leave the room. And the one time the snake is not hungry or is going into shed and simply does not want to eat, the rodent has free rein in that enclosure for hours. The safest approach is to always use pre-killed or frozen, thawed prey. Pre-killed feeders are widely available. They are safer. They are often cheaper in bulk, and they carry less risk of disease transmission. If your reptile refuses to eat anything that is not moving, that is a separate training issue, and there are proven techniques for transitioning them. But leaving a live rodent in a tank unattended is a risk that simply is not worth taking. Number 2, providing incorrect temperatures during and after feeding. We are at number 2, and this is the mistake that veterinarians and experienced keepers say is most responsible for chronic health problems in captive reptiles. Reptiles are ectothermic. They rely entirely on their environment to regulate body temperature, and digestion depends on heat. If the thermal gradient in your enclosure is wrong, your reptile cannot digest properly. Food can literally rot inside the gut before it is processed. This leads to bacterial infections, impaction, and in severe cases, death. A lot of owners set up their tank temperature once and never check it again. But heat bulbs lose output over time, thermostats drift. Seasons change the ambient temperature in your room. You need to check your temperatures regularly using a quality digital thermometer, not the stick-on strips that came with your starter kit. Your basking spot, your cool side, your nighttime low. All of it matters, and it matters most right after your reptile eats. Make sure your animal always has access to its optimal basking temperature for at least 24 hours after every meal. Number 1, feeding the wrong diet entirely. And here we are. The number 1 feeding mistake that 90% of reptile owners are either making or have made at some point. It comes down to this. People feed their reptile a diet based on what is convenient or what looks fine, rather than what that specific species actually needs in the wild. The most common example is the green iguana. Iguanas are strict herbivores. They should never eat animal protein. But for years, pet stores recommended adding insects to their diet because it seemed to help them grow. What actually happened is that those iguanas developed kidney failure at accelerated rates. Owners thought they were being helpful. They were shortening their animal's life. The same problem exists with wild-caught insects, random backyard bugs, grocery store vegetables that are high in oxalates, and protein sources that work for one species but are toxic to another. And it goes beyond just what you feed. Frequency, variety, and even how food is presented all fall under diet. A tortoise that only ever gets one type of leafy green will develop deficiencies just as surely as one eating the wrong food entirely. Variety is not optional, it's part of the diet itself. Before you feed your reptile anything for the first time, research it specifically for your species, not reptiles in general, not lizards in general. Your specific animal, the corn snake, the blue-tongued skink, the crested gecko. Each one has a nutritional profile it evolved around, and the closer you get to that in captivity, the healthier and longer your animal will live. If this video helped you, do us a favor and hit subscribe. Drop your reptile in the comments. We read every single one. See you in the next video.